Hi, Tyler Walton here once again on a lovely Thursday afternoon. Today's message is going to be fairly brief. I will be talking about a topic that has become very near and dear to my heart. It's the topic of humility. In my book, it's an underlying theme throughout the book, throughout the 28 days to spiritual recovery. In those 28 different days, humility is mentioned 51 times. So, yes, humility is a core belief that I hold dear. Now, this is coming from someone who grew up being exceptionally arrogant and cocky and just downright rude. So, when it says in the Bible that in Proverbs 29:23, a man's pride shall bring him low, but honor shall uphold the humble in spirit. Trust me when I say, I know what it's like to be brought low because of pride. In fact, one of my mother's favorite sayings to me was, pride comes before a fall. And that was usually right after I came crashing down, bouncing along the bottom, skinning my knees, my chin, my elbows. She was always there for me. Pride comes before a fall. Yes, mother, dear, it certainly does, and it certainly did for me. So, when I fell from my career as an immigration officer and fell into addiction and dumpster diving, homeless, heroin, crystal meth addiction, trust me when I say I was definitely brought low. I experienced a whole new world, a whole new mindset, a whole new lifestyle, not one that I liked, not one that I would care to embrace again. So humility has become literally beaten into me. A lot of the beating was self-inflicted. In fact, all of it was self-inflicted. But through it all, God was faithful to be there to pick me up, to dust me off, and to get me back on track. Humility is such an underlying bedrock for the Christian faith. Without humility, we really can't love. Because humility is something that gives, something that we do to express our behavior to others. We do it in humility. We're not looking out for our own interests, but also the interests of others. It says in Peter that we're to subject ourselves to one another and clothe ourselves in humility. So, when we talk about humility today, we're going to be talking primarily about our relationship with others and how, because of love, because of grace and compassion, we give of ourselves, even when it isn't fair, even when it isn't right or doesn't seem right. We give of ourselves in humility. And we give it of ourselves to others so that they will feel blessed, they will feel compassion and grace because of the humility that we exhibit. I'm going to tell you a story, and this happened years and years ago. 1982, this was another missionary story. I'm going to change the names of the principal characters. They will be referred to as Paul and Silas, fitting for a nice missionary duo, and I'm not sure who I was in that whole mix. Anyway, but the story is about Paul and Silas. I had actually come to meet them in Romania, and we figured we could do the entire country of dropping off Christian books and literature and Bibles. We could do it nonstop. And so we did. As we were going through the mountainous region of north central Romania, Silas got sick. and he got violently sick. We were in a Volkswagen bus. Now, they're not the most road-friendly vehicles, and going around some of these mountain curves and corners, let's just say Silas was a bright shade of green, and he was begging us, not us, but the driver, to please slow down because he was going to lose it. I was in the passenger seat, and I looked over at the driver when Silas had asked us to please slow down. And he just chuckled and sped up and made Silas's trip a living hell. Well, from the bright shade of green, he turned to dark green. And eventually we got to our destination, and he was just sprawled out in the back, unable to move, not going anywhere, not doing anything, sicker than the proverbial dog. This wasn't a stellar moment in the annals of mission work and teamwork, any kind of work. As fate would have it, about a week and a half later, after we'd done our tour through Romania and through Bulgaria, and how we went down to Yugoslavia to pick up a pastor and his family to take them to the beaches of Greece for their month-long holiday, we found ourselves at this beautiful resort on a bay on the Aegean Sea. It was gorgeous. It was paradise. I mean, we had just been doing hardcore missionary work, risking our lives, crossing borders with Bibles and Christian literature, and it was exciting work and it was fun, but the rest was going to do us good. And the weather was gorgeous. The sea was wonderful. It was beautiful. The first night, I was down at the beach a little later than I probably should have been, but I went back to our cabin, and there were some people there. We had hooked up with a mission group that was doing beach ministry, evangelizing Yugoslavs who would come down to Greece to spend a month in the sand and surf. Anyway, as I walked into the cabin, I noticed that a couple of the beds were empty, and sure enough, it was Paul and Silas. And I asked some of the guys, I said, "So where are Paul and Silas?" I said, "Oh, you just missed them. Paul wasn't feeling too well." And I said, "Oh, really? I wonder why Silas went with them." And as I looked out the window, it was a beautiful full moon. The moon lit up the field, and I saw Paul and Silas walking across the field. Paul was sicker than a dog, and he could hardly walk. Now, here's where the whole story converges, because Silas, despite having been abused on the trip in Romania, he came alongside Paul, put his arm around him, put Paul's arm around his neck, and helped him walk across the field, literally almost carrying him across the field to the bathroom where Paul could then puke his guts out. At that moment, I felt God speak to me and just point out the beauty of the humility of that moment, of the grace and compassion that Silas had for Paul, even though he had every right, humanly speaking, to say, "You know what, you're on your own, man. Make your own way there. Crawl across the field on your own." Instead, he came alongside of him, he wrapped his arms around him, and he literally carried him across the field. And I was humbled by that sight. And I haven't forgotten it almost 40 years later. It was the most amazing act of humility, an act of grace and compassion that I have ever seen. But such is the nature of humility. Such is the nature of grace and compassion. Humility allows us to not count the wrongs that were done to us, but to live in the moment and to live for the other person. To not be so self-absorbed and self-centered, but to live for the other person. So, with that said, that will be our message for today. Thank you and God bless.